Peace and love, family. Thank you for joining us on another edition of the RAM Book Club, Resurgence of the African Mind, where we seek to liberate African minds by reading one unit of work at a time. As you all know, we are reading Powernomics by Dr. Claud Anderson, the National Plan to Empower Black America. My name is Lily Lapoete Speaks, also known as Alima Njai. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram at Lily Lapoete Speaks. You can also check out my blog, www.lilylapoetespeaks.com. I'm going to make sure that I start putting the links to the videos, family, also on the blog like I was doing with the other books. So just give me a little bit of time for that. This week we are kicking it off with chapter 5, practicing group economics. I'm going to let the rest of the panel introduce themselves, and thank you all for joining us. Peace.
Peace and love. This is your sister, Dr. Maat. I'm happy to be here to discuss chapter 5 of Powernomics. Tonight we'll be talking about group economics, a topic that we touched on when we read Blueprint for Black Power about a year or 2 years ago. I think we did that. We finished that book up in 2018, right, Queen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we'll be, I know in that book they talked about group economics, and so we'll be exploring that topic again. I look forward to the discussion. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic so that I can get some links out for folks to join us.
Brother Shimsu.
Oh, peace, fam. This is Brother Shimsu out of Detroit. Just love the panel. Can't wait to get into this discussion of chapter 5, group economics. I mean, that's the topic of what Black people are suffering from worldwide, whether it be at home in the continent or whether it be here. You know, our individualism is destroying us, and I just can't wait to get ready. So peace, fam.
All right. Well, while Dr. Maat is dropping some links in various groups, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with chapter 5.
That's Brother Tyrone.
Is Brother Tyrone in here?
Yep.
Oh, Brother Tyrone.
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, peace, fam. Finally been able to make it. Sorry, I've been traveling the last couple of days, so yeah, that's why I didn't come the last time, but I'm here now.
Okay, well, at least you were able to get home. You didn't get like locked out or nothing, right?
Right.
Very good.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hey, brothers and sisters, let's kick it off. So we started chapter 5, and he's just talking about the economic boom and how it started in the early 90s, and Black people, of course, didn't really partake in that economic boom. We don't really boom with others. We had our moments, but it's been a while. I noticed a interesting thing that he said that Alan Greenspan, the chairman of the board of the Federal Reserve, that he made a statement, and he said, "I have no illusions that the task of breaking down barriers that produce disparities in income and wealth will be simple." But he warned that this task remains an important goal because societies cannot thrive if significant segments perceive their functioning as unjust. I thought that was interesting when he said that societies cannot thrive. And I was thinking to myself, well, in actuality, they can, because we've considered our position here unjust since we've been here, and society has been thriving. So I disagreed with that statement. Moving on to page 120, he starts discussing where does wealth come from. And of course, we know that wealth comes through the acquisition of land, stocks, bonds, things of that nature. He says that there are 2 basic methods to achieve wealth. First, it can be created or acquired through redistribution. Of course, we know what redistribution is. And then also he says, I can't find where he said the second one. I thought I had it highlighted, but that's the first one. And then we go on to talk about businesses and ownerships. And he's saying that the other way that we can get it would be increased businesses and reparations. Now, of course, that's a topic that has been discussed forever, which I don't personally think we will ever get it.
I agree.
Other people think that we may, but I won't say anything negatively about people who feel that we deserve it, because we definitely do. I just don't know if it's ever going to happen.
And so, yeah, I agree with you too, Queen. It would be nice if it did happen.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, we've been we've been emancipated for how many years, and it's never happened. And so I doubt that it will happen in our lifetime.
And I think there's too much emphasis. I'm not against reparations either. I'm for reparations, but I think that we collectively is no excuse for our economic condition to be this way. That's pure individualism and our ego. and our sense of selfishness of survival, as opposed to like we're talking about right here is group economics. It's too much effort, I think, to get reparation from them, as opposed to we can use that same energy as building something for ourselves.
Oh my God. Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Mhm.
May I add something?
Go ahead. Yeah. Can we build it? We're
Okay.
building.
All right. So regardless of whether we deserve it or not, the way that the world works, if you want something, you got to fight for it,
Mhm.
even if you do deserve it.
Mhm.
So it's not going to come easy. They're just not going to give it to you. These, like I say, these are people who conquer other people. They're not going to do it unless you do it by force.
Mhm. That's a fact. That's something that we're not stupid enough to do.
Yeah, but let me ask you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, Queen. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that I was finishing up, Queen. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, I agree 100% with him, that no one's going to give anything to you. You gotta fight for it and take it. But do you think, and I also agree with Brother Shamsu, that we expend too much energy, fighting for reparations when we should actually be just trying to build our own, and like I said in previous discussions, I mean, the Jews have done it, the Asians have done it, and I feel like we have the ability to do it also. I've heard several brothers tell me, Doc, you can't compare us to other groups of people. They have a different history. They have a different psychology. They have a different culture. But I believe that if other groups of people can do certain things, I believe that we can too. I don't think that any group is better than our group. You know what I mean? The Honorable Marcus Garvey, I remember in one speech, he said, if you can't do what other races have done, you might as well die, And so, he said that. And so, I think that we can do it. And I think that the focus should definitely be on, just building our own communities versus fighting white folks to get what we know they owe us. But, I think that we should be, building, so I just wanted to say that.
Which one of y'all have mentioned the psychology of self-hatred and self-defeat by Dr. Amos Wilson? I'm listening to his live lecture on that. I'm just blown away.
I've been talking about it.
My God.
I've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks.
My God. I listened to part 1 and 2. I'm getting ready to listen to it again.
Yeah.
There's so much analysis in his understanding, and he talks about the pathology of Europeans and how they're naturally destructive, and how we emulate their the major problem of Black people is we emulate ourselves behind their pathology, which is a very sick people collectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Sister Lima and I, we say it all the time, how we literally have become them. How back in the day, with W.E.B. Du Bois, let me stop, because look, Sister Lima say, Doc, it's not Du Bois, it's Du Bois. But with W.E.B. Du Bois, when he wrote Souls of Black Folks, and when Dr. Amos Wilson wrote The Developmental Psychology of the Black Child, they felt like we were operating with a dual or double consciousness. And so Sister Alima and I have been saying for quite some time that I don't even think it's a double consciousness anymore. We don't think it's a double consciousness or a dual consciousness. We have literally become them.
Yep.
So like you said, we have taken on their pathologies.
But W.B. Du Bois is hypocritical in that. It's because the simple fact is that, the talented 10th was reflective of mulattoes, basically mulatto Blacks, who he thought was going to be the chosen people that's going to uplift the race. Mr. Garvey visited his organization. Nothing there but was mulattoes. He had, and he's consistently been in elite organizations, whether that be the Boulay or the Jack and Jill. He's always been a kind of elitist, formulating himself based on a lot of European concepts. To me, I think that he's hypocritical in that.
Let me ask you a question, though. No. You're talking about hypocritical in saying that Black folks operate with a double consciousness?
Yeah, himself is reflective of that, I'm saying.
Absolutely. I think he is too. But didn't you say in a previous discussion that that W.E.B. evolved beyond his idea about the talented 10th? You said he did.
Yeah, and from Dusk to Dawn, he recants that. He does. I have to admit that. And then later he did go to Africa. But Dr. John Henry Clark, if I can get that tape of him talking about W.E.B. Du Bois never really embraced his Africanness. He, even when he went into Africa, he still went in there with a European mind and European eyes.
Well, you know what I gotta say, Brother Shamsu, and that may be true. I don't know whether it is true. But what I'm learning is, I remember reading some publication by Carter G. Woodson, and Carter G. Woodson said that it took him nearly 30 years. As a matter of fact, I didn't read it. Dr. Amos Wilson mentioned it in a speech. He said that Carter G. Woodson wrote that it took him nearly 30 or 40 years to reprogram his mind.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, so that
and then he was a member of the Boule too. That's who keep his book, who really keep it, let's keep it real, who keep his book in publication of Miseducation of the Negro is the Boule. If you get to get his book and look in the early front pages of the book, you'll see Sigma Pi Phi. Who keeps the book in publication is the Boule.
Never knew that.
Yeah.
Never knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, but so yeah, you're right about that. You have to, and he did evolve from, you see a big difference between him really criticizing Garvey's Back to Africa movement to actually moving into Africa into Pan-Africanism. So you do see it. I do see an evolution.
Okay, definitely growth.
Yeah, I do
definitely saw some growth.
I definitely saw some growth.
All right, and also, family, I see folks joining us right now. I see a couple of folks joining us right now, but come on, guys, share the conversation. If you love what you're hearing, man, share the conversation. Give us a thumbs up. Post us on your social media pages. Let people know that we are live. Go ahead, Sister Alima. Go ahead and continue, Queen.
All right, continuing on page 121, he tells us about the secret to obtaining wealth, which we all that are should know, but if you don't, the secret to creating wealth is to own and control resources. Those type of resources would be land, water, minerals, metals, machinery, factories, public improvements, skilled, literate labor force under the sense of human capital. He all goes on to reference John Galbraith, and he points out that those people who do not understand or pretend that they do not know how an economy is built and operates automatically surrender all wealth building powers to those who do. And that is the predicament that we have been in since we got here. We've had our moments of shining, of course, but they were interrupted. But this is in essence what we have been struggling with, because we still do not fully understand the way that an economy is built and operated. So we continue to be under the thumb of those who do.
And speaking of an economy, Queen, you got some brothers online who are, and when you said economy, I thought about the Self-Made series on Netflix that was inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. You got brothers online just.
Oh, I hated that movie. I hated that. I hated that.
I looked at it. And the one thing, Brother Shamsu, I can say, I did see a lot of historical inaccuracies, right? I saw a lot of them. But I didn't expect it to be a historically accurate film. It was a series that was simply inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. It wasn't a story about the life of Madam C.J. Walker. Like I'm telling you, I didn't expect for it to be accurate. Just like when I looked at the Harriet Tubman movie, and there were folks like, oh my gosh, it was horrible. It wasn't historically accurate. And I'm like, look, I didn't expect it to be historically accurate.
It was too much emphasis on colorism to me.
Yeah, it was a lot of inference. It was a lot of
I didn't like
emphasis
that.
on colorism, definitely.
And we already have a deep division among Black people with that. But it's a movie. It's a movie.
But Brother Shamsu, isn't that a reality? I mean, wasn't that a reality back then? It was, colorism to me today is terrible. But back then, we're talking early 1900s. There's a book out called Selling Beauty to African American females from the 1920s to 1975. And it talks about how it was a lot of colorism back then because you had a lot of advertisement ads that had white women on it, as the standard of beauty. They said a lot of sisters back then, they felt like they were ugly. Like it was a lot, and it still goes on today. So, wasn't that a reality back then? I understand that we don't like to see the division. But wasn't that the reality? It was a lot of
A
colorism
lot of,
back then.
it sure was, sure
You know,
was.
so I'm like,
And there was a big, even you can see that play out between Mr. Garvey and Du Bois. You saw the big arguments, him calling him an ape, and Du Bois, criticizing his, French culture, his sense of being, his proudness of being French and black. So you
yeah.
saw
So I
that
mean,
back and forth between them two, big
yeah.
time.
So it happened. It definitely happened. But I brought up the story to say that Arab brothers now who are biting on, Madam C.J. Walker, and I mean, everyone's entitled to feel the way they feel, but no one can deny the fact that she brought an economy to the Black community.
Yes, she did.
She brought, manufacturing centers, training centers. She made people business people. She was selling a product. So she produced a product in the Black community and sold a product in the Black community. So she brought an entire economy to the Black community, which created jobs. It groomed business people. She brought money to the Black community. And that money was used for scholarships and donated to various Black organizations, and even she helped out with a lot of political matters. Just using her money and her power. So when Sister Lima talked about how we don't have that, we had it, but she's right, we don't have it today, but we definitely had it back in the day.
And I didn't like that statement how they wrote Booker T. Washington into that narrative also. Had him as like a assimilationist. Okay, first of all, look how many Black people get hundreds of millions of dollars. Athletes, entertainers get hundreds of millions of dollars from white people. Do they build institutions like Booker T. Washington? And after the emancipation of 1865, where was he to get the money from? He had to play some kind of game to get resources. That man started that man started Tuskegee, a broke, dilapidated church, which that man started that Tuskegee with, and look the kind of institution that he built. I think that they were that it was a very terse type of dialogue that they had, that they kind of wrote into that movie, that I didn't like, particularly like how they categorized Mr. Washington.
Yeah, I didn't like that either. I didn't like that either. But the point that I was trying to make is that she did have an economy, and like Sister Lima said, we don't have that. We don't have like a major goods or products that are produced in the Black community and sold in the Black community. We don't have our own industry, our own economy. We don't have it.
She was a very successful woman, very strong, independent Black woman. I have to give it that.
Absolutely. And one thing that you notice, and one thing you notice in the film is that they practice group economics.
Yes, they did.
They practice group economics. But go ahead, Queen.
Okay, Queen. So on page 122 and 123, he only tells the story of the villagers and the catching the fish each day and this whoop-de-whoop. But what really stood out was two things that he quoted. Towards the bottom, he says that the world's total wealth is estimated at about 390 trillion. He says that he talks about wealth disparity, and he says the wealth disparity between Blacks and whites is so greater that two whites together, Bill Gates and Lawrence Ellison, have a net worth that is greater than the collective net worth of this nation's 36 million Black people. And that just put that into perspective. There's two people who hold more wealth than 30 whatever million of us combined.
Wow.
That speaks volumes. And then he goes on and talks about South Africa. South Africa is a 99% Black country, yet the De Beers Corporation, which is a white-owned company, controls 50% of that Black nation's wealth. The remaining 50% is split basically between 2.5 million whites. So the 29 million Black South Africans are left with practically zero wealth in the most richly endowed country on earth.
And also the Oppenheimers is big in South Africa.
Wow. Queen, my mouth is just,
That's
when
incredible.
I read that, my mouth just dropped.
Mine did as well.
Yeah.
99% Black, and they
99%.
So 1% controls 99%.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what that means, brother. And that's scary to even think. We move into the mainstream economy, and the white majority tells us about the majority society economic model and how it extends its economy into Black communities and pursues the Black consumer, which we all know that other economies, other ethnic groups, they leech off of our community. Moving on to page 124. What did I have here? I don't have anything highlighted specifically, but what I do remember is them talking about the model of economic growth, for the non-blacks within Black communities. And this was presented by Porter, saying that he must be given credit just for different economic models that he has put out there for us. There's plenty of economic models that have always been available actually for us within different periods of time. We have just yet to utilize those models on a massive scale. Okay, moving on to a new orientation. So the new orientation for Black America within the framework of a national plan is once again the practice of group economics, which means putting our money together, family, for the benefit of us. And he said that the goal of Powernomics is to draw wealth, income, and other resources into Black communities and make them more economically self-sufficient and competitive. Because at the end of the day, we have been behind the curve for 400 years at this point. Anybody want to add anything before we go into technology, wealth, and new orientation?
No, Queen. I mean, you're right. Like you're saying it all. We had literally been, we're behind the curve. And, and we, in previous chapters, we've talked about why we are behind. So I don't want to, rehash any of that, but we're definitely behind the curve and need a plan to catch up. We need a plan to catch up. But at the rate we're moving, I doubt if we ever catch up. But anyway, go ahead, continue, Queen.
That's the sad truth. So now we get into talking about technology and how we could possibly emerge ourselves, engulf ourselves into technology in order to better ourselves. But also how technology has been responsible for systematically taking away employment from Black people. And he wants us to know that technology is and always has been just as a political tool as any other economic tool. And he gives an example of how in the early 1900s, once the cotton machine came out and it could pick like 50 times way more cotton than we could, we had to move up north to go find some jobs because at that point we didn't have jobs anymore. So he has a model here on page 127, and it's showing us how you start having the natural resources and things when you own those, and how it go. All of this basically goes into a cycle, and it's called the cycle and foundations of wealth production. So once you get the natural resources, the land, minerals, and precious metals, you utilize slavery and human labor, and you can turn that into technology and labor-saving machinery, which turns into information and manipulation of symbols. And it just kind of continues and continues and continues.
Yes.
So I love, sis, how with the diagram, how it just shows that circle. And like you said, it's a continuous thing, but it always goes back to the natural resources, controlling the land, controlling the minerals and the precious metals. It always goes back to the control of the natural resources. And that's our biggest problem, on the continent. We have the continent of Africa. We have a continent that's full of natural resources, but we don't control it.
I don't think the Africans was really aware of the value of that on the international world. There was a natural way of living for them,
right?
And then, but the European was covetous. You know what I mean? Who came in there, but like the Native Americans, with the sense of land, they didn't have a concept of segmenting a piece of land and being segregated as a whole from other people. We just didn't have that kind of concept, of murdering one another based on minerals coming out of the earth like that. I don't think we had a concept like that.
No, we didn't. That's definitely a fact.
So it made us unprepared to deal with that European.
Agreed.
Yeah.
That's true, family. Moving on to page 128, what I took away with was the emphasis that in the cycle of wealth, material resources always come before technology. So he's basically saying that there's a time that will come in where technology is not as prevalent as it is today. And at the end of the day, what the fallback will be the ownership of natural resources. And so, like he's saying, even if we are to dip our foot into that pool, we still need to put more emphasis on owning the natural resources because that's what fuels the cycle. Okay, economic action step 1, create an alternative economy within Black communities. We all are familiar with what alternative economies are. Like, they had Germantown back in the day. They had little Irish areas where they had their own distilleries. They had the different cotton industries and then, the Chinatowns and stuff like that. That's an alternative economy to where you set yourself up to have your own economy within an economy.
Yes. Like here in Detroit.
Really, yes, exactly, my brother. Like in Detroit and also like out here in Atlanta. I think Atlanta it's a good model, but if they still need to just tuck it in a little bit more and make it a little bit more official, like they need to really delegate, in my opinion, a certain area
that they're going to put a lot of their businesses in. A lot of the Black businesses out here are very spread apart. And I think that takes away from, you know what I mean, from the ultimate, because once you're meshed together with other businesses, it kind of is hard to control your dollar within your community.
And you go to Dearborn, you right back in the Middle East. The religion, all the stores is controlled by them. It's like you in the Middle East. They don't, they don't have to leave their community for banking. They don't have to leave their community for food. They don't have to leave their community. Everything. They even have their own doctors that they go see. That they set up, their own medical facilities. That's where many of the Black Muslims go over there to get treatment. I mean, they're completely self-sufficient. Even their own medical facilities.
And that's what we need, my brother. This is what this is talking about, an alternative economy. And Baba is saying that by utilizing the tools that he put out, the vertical integration and thinking outside the box, that Black businesses communities can be built in a vertical chain of obligation. He says we have a vertical chain of obligation when a series of obligation exists between various Black businesses and Black customers, when businesses and customers support each other. And that's what we talked about before, about building that relationship back with one another, a trusting relationship to where we can even get to a point to even do business, because we don't trust one another. Hence why most of us won't even support the Black businesses that we do have.
That's deep.
So moving on, how does a vertical chain of obligation work in real world? It establishes the ability to exploit the niche markets. An incident between Asian merchants and Black suppliers in Chinatown. And he was basically saying how the Black people came down and they wanted to do business with the people in Chinatown, and the people in Chinatown just did not want to buy from them at all.
I remember that.
I remember that too.
I did too, to cut their offerings to under 25% of what the Chinese people were already spending, and they still refused to do business with them. So that just goes to show you that they weren't trying to let the Black people in on none of the money that was coming from the Black community.
The straightening comb, the pick, the comb, everything's manufactured in Korea now. They took all of those type of utensils that we use to do our hair, wave caps, everything. They manufacture everything now. A lot of Black hair care companies who own Black hair care companies sold out to them. They even bought them.
So that's true, brother. So he's saying we used to talk about Jim Crow time and how we had the segregation. We developed the quasi business communities. He said these communities were exciting places to shop, work, and socialize. And our segregated business communities were limited and could not compare with traditional communities. But however, they provided us with everything that we needed, which is most important.
The Andersons had a big busing company in the Carolinas, y'all know.
The Andersons?
Claud Anderson's family. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were in transportation, busing.
Nice.
Yeah. They family went under, but after Jim Crow, but yeah, they were major players in the Carolinas with your transit system. Yeah,
that's right. Well, he goes on to say that even though the Black quasi communities that we have known, they've been long gone, family, but the other ones that are still around, as far as other ethnic groups, they survive, of course, because of their mutual understandings about the market loyalties, their obligations to one another, their obligations to their merchants that are their own people, and just loyalty basically is what it boils down to. They say that we're going to put ourselves above every other racial group or every other ethnic group, as they should. So we go on, and he's going to show us how to build an alternative economy as far as ethnic immigrants. And these are some of the things that they do. Accept low-wage jobs to get a foot in the door so that they can learn the business. Our culture, to take business risks, pool resources, and start their own businesses. Hire members of their own family or ethnicity in their businesses. Harbor a strong group identity and sense of mutual dependence. Bank and borrow from their own families, people, and community-led institutions. Build alternative economies within their communities to supply jobs, services, and products for their own people. Use satellite businesses in Black communities as platforms to penetrate major markets. Conduct businesses with members of their own group first. Use diversity and the minority label to gain access to and compete against Blacks for resources. Use language, religion, and culture to mark and close their communities. Build businesses and industries that use products that can be linked to their country of origin, and they avoid being identified with Blacks so that they can continue to benefit from the dominant society hatred for Blacks.
Wow.
Now, if all that ain't the truth, that's exactly what they asses do when they get up over here. And that's how they come up in 2 generations and they already rich.
Yep. Yep. And he broke down the formula. He broke it down perfectly. I'm sorry, Brother Tyrone, were you trying to say something?
I can tell you that everything he just said is very true because I've seen it on an international level, and it's crazy. Like I went to, because I've been to the Middle East and I've also been to different parts of Europe, and it's just like you said, they take the low-paying jobs, particularly like Indians or Filipinos. They take the low-paying jobs, and then many of them get on it, and then they start pulling their resources, and it's like, wow. And sooner or later, you start seeing like businesses pop up here and there, like but they all close to each other too. That's the other thing, and it'd be like, wow, what is this? You know what I'm saying? I saw that when I went to London, especially. Them Arab people, they got London on lock. They got London on lock, let me tell you.
Wow.
Wow.
And they drive taxi cabs here, and then they open up dollar stores.
Same thing they do in New York.
Wow.
They do up north. Anybody want to take over at the economic action step 2?
Yes, Queen. I'll take over.
What page are you on?
We're on page 132.
132.
Yep. So it says economic action step 2, dominate business ownership and management where Black people are the majority consumer population. Oh my gosh. I mean, I think that kind of summed it up, right? What we have to do. It says, I'm on page 133. He says, where Blacks are the dominant consumer, they have a competitive market advantages. Blacks make purchases that are disproportionate to and exceed white purchases by 2 to 5 times in the following areas. Number 1, clothes and accessories.
Talk about it.
You know that. That's what we love to buy. We love the front with our clothes and our pieces, and that's what we do. So number 1, clothes and accessories. 2, watches and jewelry. 3, consumer electronics. 4, hair care products. 5, used cars. 6 theater tickets. 6 theater tickets. 7, he mislabeled this because I see 2 6s, but 7, intra-city mass transit services. 7, this should be 8, cosmetic products. 9, certain foods. 10, he says leather goods. 11, it will be children's footwear. 12, athletic shoes. 13, certain brands of cigarettes. And 14, Scotch liquor and certain other alcoholic beverages. As if Blacks had an economic part in manufacturing and selling those products, and communities would buy from Black merchants, Black businesses could be built and sustained around these items. But unfortunately, whites and other ethnic groups take for granted that Blacks have no options but to go to non-Black communities to buy products. Meanwhile, it does not seem to matter to Blacks that whites and other groups boycott Black businesses. So he's right. So we go out here, we spend our money with non-Blacks who don't spend their money with Black-owned businesses. There are several Black businesses in Baltimore, and outside of the food businesses, because I know there are 2 vegan restaurants in Baltimore, and I have gone in there and seen white folks and Asian folks and Hispanic folks patronize those businesses. But there are also a number of other Black businesses in Baltimore who only get patronized by Black people. Whites and Hispanics and Asians, they don't go in there. So we go out here and we spend our money with everybody, but they don't spend their money with us. So does anyone want to add to that?
Especially things like that, just the emphasis on those things that he's mentioned. Like some of us have attempted to break into, try to pierce the mold a little bit with manufacturing some of these things, but because the market is so heavily saturated with products and companies that have been out for so long that people are loyal to, because we're brand loyal. So it's hard to break that. It's hard to get into that without that sense of loyalty that is needed, loyalty to group economics. That's what it all falls back on, is Black people's sense of loyalty to their own communities.
And I think that's what needs to be resolved. I mean, we could sit here and yell "buy Black" all day. But if like you said, sis, if we don't love each other, if we're not loyal to each other, if we don't trust each other, that won't happen. That won't happen. That won't happen. Okay, so moving to the bottom of 134, he says, let's apply our principles of dominating in business wherever we dominate in population. So wherever we live, we should be dominating in business wherever we are the majority. Okay. And then he goes on to talk about how prisons, how we make up the majority of the prisons, but yet we don't have any Black businesses that service the prisons. So even though we're in there, we don't even have Black businesses that are making money off of the prison populations. So on 135, he says, since Blacks are dominant in the prison population, Black businesses should also dominate in contracts for business construction, management, suppliers. He says professional services to prisoners. He says Black businesses should be allowed to establish prison industries and benefit from cheap prison labor to manufacture products and provide services. Black businesses should provide workforce training to prisoners that they can use once released. Since Black people and Black communities are the victims of most Black crimes, the Black communities, they should benefit from any wealth building that flows from the prison system. So again, he emphasizes that we need to practice dominating in business where we are the majority population. Does anyone want to add anything before I move on to economic action step 3?
Something, because I remember having this conversation before with one of my professors when I was in school. And we were talking specifically about prisons, but we were talking about the numbers. And so I threw it to ownership. And I said, it's funny that we make up such a huge amount of the population, yet we don't own any prisons. And I remember the outcry family, when I say those people were pissed that I even suggested it. But once I broke it down, I'm like, we're going to go to prison irregardless, because with the racial system, we're going to be subjugated to longer sentences, and we'll be subjugated to more unfairness than any other race would ever face in this country. So with that in mind, we could actually own prisons that are actually going to be geared towards rehabilitation, because these prisons that we have, that the white people have set up, they're geared toward recidivism. That's how they make money. They don't make money by rehabilitating people and they don't come back into the system. So we should own our own prisons and make sure that we rehabilitate our people and get them productive for society, and then make sure that they understand that same code of conduct and loyalty that we would establish in our communities, and bring them back into the community so they can fucking work.
Exactly. But I know when you said that, I know you caught a lot of flack.
A lot.
Yeah, I know you did. Like, what? How could she capitalizing off our suffering? Is how they viewed it.
Of course.
What do you mean? We should capitalize off our own suffering? But I'm with you. If we're going there regardless, why not? Why not participate in making money and like you said, actually going into the prisons and trying to sincerely rehabilitate our brothers and sisters who are there? Why not? So go ahead, Brother Shamsu. I see you unmuted your mic, King.
I totally agree.
All right, so moving on to economic action step number 3, focus on wealth building and restoring the economic intent of the original civil rights laws. And as many of you already know, we got a brother, oh my gosh, MC, I always forget his name, Byron Allen. Yeah, Brother Byron Allen, who's fighting or suing Comcast based on racial discrimination. And I think he's suing them based on Civil Rights Act of 1866, I believe. So anyway, Dr. Claud Anderson says that we need to focus on wealth building and restoring the economic intent of the original civil rights laws. So he goes on to say, and I'm trying to see what I actually highlighted here. So he goes on to say that there was an article published in the USA Today back in 2000 about racial and ethnic household incomes hitting an all-time high between 1989 and 1999. And it says during that period, the median income of Black Americans, it was below Asians, whites, and Hispanics. And I mean, I looked at that, Sister Aleem, I said, wow, okay, so, it's basically the same now. Like if you guys do a quick Google search on, wealth or income by race, you'll see that we are beneath the Asians, whites, and Hispanics. But anyway, it says that the article indicated the income gap between rich and poor was not getting wider, but it actually is. But anyway, it says the article implied that even though blacks were on the bottom, they were not too far below Hispanics, so conditions were improving for everyone. And he says what the article failed to address was why Black Americans were still fixed on low income, the lowest income rung. And he says more specifically, it should have been addressed why Asians and Hispanics, 90% of whom have been in the United States less than 30 years, have medium incomes that are above and nearly double a Black population that has been here for over 400 years. And so this was back in 1989. What do you say, 89 to 1999? And it's still like that today. You know, as a matter of fact, the median income gap is actually widening. So he goes on to say that every time Black poverty is pointed out as a problem, there's a rush to eradicate the poverty of newly arriving immigrants or to totally eradicate the poverty of poor whites. And did you notice that, Sister Lima, like with the Democrats, when you talk about Black poverty, you know, it's like, we want to help everybody. You know, we want to help all disenfranchised. We want to help everybody. They never want to specifically, they never want to, or they don't put energy into helping Black people specifically. So he's right. The problem becomes everybody's problem. Immigrants who just came over, poor whites, it becomes an everybody problem. Does anyone else want to expound on that?
No, I agree.
Okay, cool. So then he goes on to say that in the absence of leadership, it is imperative that Black Americans become singularly devoted to wealth creation and wealth redistribution in Black communities. When I read that line, I'm thinking that it says in the absence of, I guess Black folks, we would have to have a code in place. Mm-hmm. So if there isn't a person or an organization or a vanguard spearheading that effort, we would definitely have to all be living by a code of conduct. Like, look, we're going to practice group economics. We're going to shop here with each other. It would have to be a code of conduct in order to get us to focus on wealth creation and wealth redistribution. If, there isn't, if it's not done under, leadership.
Right.
Yeah, we would definitely have to. So he says, as implied earlier, civil rights in the United States isn't what it used to be, nor does it reflect the original laws and legal precedents. Today, the term civil rights applies to the freedom and rights of all members of our society, especially minorities. However, that was not the original intent of the term. When the term civil rights was first used at the close of the Civil War, it referred to the freedom and economic rights of Black slaves as ratified in the civil rights laws of 1865 and 1866. So I was right, Bob Allen, he's suing based on the civil rights law of 1866. He says the radical Republican sponsors of these laws knew that economic rights were far more critical to newly freed slaves than social and political rights. In 1865, Congressman Thaddeus Stevens framed civil rights as an economic issue, saying that Black people could only be slaves or free without at least 40 acres and a mule and $100 for economic base, Blacks will forever be slaves. That was deep, Queen. Mm-hmm. That was deep. And so then he goes on to say, and I have this actually highlighted, it says the Black civil rights movement of the 1960s developed around the search for social and political rights for everybody, especially for minorities. It lost focus on Black people in economics. It wasn't an economic movement at all. No. It was all about social and political rights. It says the social achievements of the Black civil rights movement are not without merit. It did help Black Americans socially, but hamstrung Blacks economically by one, diverting an economic issue to a social and political goals, and two, making Black people consumers instead of believers. Three, focusing on the inequality of income rather than wealth. Four, encouraging them to be job seekers rather than job producers. Five, espousing altruism for the world rather than group self-interest. And six, ignoring public policies that made Blacks impoverished guests in America. That was powerful. because that's exactly what the civil rights movement was. I mean, they weren't thinking about economic rights at all. I mean, well, towards the end, and Brother Shamsu, you could correct me if I'm wrong, towards the end, Dr. King, he did shift his philosophy, right? Because it started to be this poor people's movement, right?
But they didn't have a real concept of economics. Dr. King, he did emphasize, more so when they it was going to go to March on Washington for poor farmers. But Dr. King was just not developed in that area. That's more that nationalistic endeavor, where Malcolm excelled more so than he did. Dr. King was a brilliant man, but he didn't really have a grasp of, Black empowerment. He even criticized Black power. That's what him and Stokely was at odds, because Stokely was the first to really come out with that term Black power, and Dr. King didn't approve of that.
Okay. All right. Okay, so you say he still didn't have a concept. So even though they were, coming up with this people's movement,
he didn't really
still didn't have a concept of what, we should be. Okay.
Yeah, but that was Malcolm's arena there. He didn't really have a concept of that.
Got you. Okay. All right. So moving on, economic action step 4, counter the brain drain with businesses that aggressively attract Black talent from schools, the government, and corporate America. Yeah, we have to stop that. I actually see this at Morgan a lot. You have a lot of white folks from corporate America. They come to Morgan, and I'm pretty sure other HBCUs, and they come and they recruit our best and our brightest to come and work for them. So Dr. Claud Anderson is saying, look, we have to counter that. He calls it the brain drain. Okay. So he's saying we got to stop sending our best and our brightest out here to, the white corporations, the schools and the governments, right? We need to keep them right here at home to help build our communities. So what are your thoughts on that, Sister Lenore, Brother Shamsu, Brother Tyrone?
I definitely agree with that. But I would have to still go back to this all would only work with a certain mindset and obligation to one's community, because in the startup of these communities or things that he is proposing, then, at the beginning, you might finish school, but we can't afford to pay you what a white company would pay you. You know what I'm saying? So then that comes down to your sense of morale and what's
exactly
your dedication to this come up and this idea of us generating some generational wealth, or is it more important for you individualistically to live good? So I think that's the sense of it as well, because if you notice, that was one of the things they mentioned about the foreigners when they come here, is that they're willing to possibly live 2 and 3 families to a house, and they're willing to take maybe a lower paying job, because it is more beneficial for the family as opposed to what's more beneficial for them. So I agree with that, but just under certain circumstances would it even work.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used that word. Was good for the individual, because, like you said, we would have to have a certain mindset. A lot of us are extremely individualistic, so they're not thinking about they're not thinking about the greater good. People are thinking about themselves. So I agree with you, Queen, that it had to be a certain mindset.
Right, I totally agree. And typically, if they're going to give you $75,000 to $80,000, as opposed to you may make, it's uncertain in the Black community how much we could actually, actually pay the person, right, the college student. That's going to be difficult. That's why I still believe that, we got to create organizations and grab young people and create a cadre, and where they we can instill what we're talking about here.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So he says, since approximately 90 to 95% of all whites and Asians work for their own people within their own communities, Black people become the exception. Says only 2% of all working Black Americans work for their own people within their communities. That's a problem, man. That's definitely a problem. Then he goes on to say that, he says that 50 years ago, nearly 98% of all employed Blacks worked in white homes, businesses, in communities, wow. So 98% of us, 50 years ago, so 98% of all employed Blacks worked in white homes, businesses, and communities. And I think Dr. Claud Anderson said it may be like 97% now, something like that.
Mm.
So he always says, we haven't moved one iota. You know, we talk about Black progress, but we haven't moved one iota. So, yeah. But anyway, moving on to economic action, step 5. Sister, you want to take this? Because I know you're going to get ready to go in a couple of minutes.
Okay, so he's just talking about root businesses within the Black community, and those businesses that are established based on competitive advantages within the Black community. And he says that besides offering consumer products, root businesses, they stabilize the community by offering jobs and employment training and revenues for supportive businesses and charitable organizations. So he's basically saying create businesses within those communities that will help to create more Black people who will also create businesses within their own community. Moving on to page 140, he was just giving some examples of how the Arabs and Jews and whoop-de-whoop do this and do that. We've read that a million times. We don't have to go back over that. He is saying that you have to be careful with the location of basically where you put your businesses. You don't want to trying to get a piece of that white money, and so you put your business kind of like on the outskirts of of Black businesses and a little bit ladder to a white business, hoping you get that money. But however, like he said, anytime they can decide to boycott your business, and then there goes your business up into flames. So be careful with the location of your business. Moving to economic action step 6, construct vertical businesses and industries that control all processes from raw resources in its market within and outside Black communities. He's saying basically that we should seek out key industries and strive to create a monopoly through vertical integration, which locks out the competition, which basically is what we have been dealing with because we've been locked out of competing for ages. And that's what we need to try and combat. On page 142, he gives an example. He says, for instance, more than 40% of all United States exports and nearly 50% of its imports do not compete in the open market. Instead, they move through closed channels. So they basically set it up to where they can compete in a way without stepping on each other's feet and without letting in people that they don't want to be let in. But the challenge to Black people is that we have to build and control our community markets and the products that pass through them, which we discussed earlier is the biggest issue. We don't manufacture anything. So therefore, everything that we use comes from someone else. And it's easy to control people when they don't manufacture their own products. Moving into economic 7, stop the capital drain out of Black communities. In other words, buy Black, but sell to everybody. We have that. I think most people have that general consensus, like all money is green. So you don't not take somebody's money just because they're not your people, but you spend your money with your people. And that's a big problem that we have, which we know stems from our lack of trust within one another. He says on 143, for every penny spent, the Black consumer should know what benefits the group receive in political, social, educational, and economic terms. So we should not be just spending money frivolously. In other words, we should know where the money is going to and what benefit it will have for us if spent. Black American spending patterns deprive them of their greatest potential of power, a flow of financial capital. We spend approximately 95% of our income outside of our communities. Only 2% remains in the hands of the Black community. We typically take 2% down to the local white bank, and then we deposit in a traditional savings account. So the little bit that we do have, it still gets invested in white banks, which they then lend out to white people because they do not like to lend money to Black people. On 144, besides having hundreds of times more wealth than Blacks, whites also have the advantage of living off of 2 incomes, 100% of their own money and 95% of Black people's money.
It's not funny, sis.
Not funny, but
it's like, God, when he wrote that, I was looking like, I said, oh my goodness. Goodness. It is embarrassing. It is embarrassing. 100% of their money and 95% of our money.
And we fighting for the little 5% and only end up getting 2. And then still don't put it in Black banks.
Yeah, we take our 2 and we put it in Bank of America or Wells Fargo.
The importance of keeping up with your disposable income. He's saying other people don't spend their disposable income in the manner in which we do. They understand that it's important to keep it. And he says it is important also, of course, to try and establish other types of relationships. But if they cannot be established, then we should invoke the new rule. Never treat any group better than they treat you. So basically, if people treat you like crap and it's a business within your community, then you should not be patronizing that business family.
Exactly.
And we will continue to patronize a business just because it's right up the street instead of taking your ass up the road maybe 10 minutes further and patronizing a business that never did a goddamn thing to you. I see people do it all the time, and they will
Yes.
complain and complain and complain, but you'll see them in there week after week after
week after week. Yep.
just because it's convenient. We have to get out of this need to be convenient all the time. Sometimes you have to do other things. I'm sure it wasn't convenient for them during the boycotts to fucking walk everywhere instead of going to take the bus to work, but they did what they had to do in order to invoke change.
Absolutely. No, Queen, you said it beautifully. But Brother Shimsu, Brother Tyrone.
Sister Lily, who was that rapper? His wife name is Teeny in Atlanta.
T.I.?
T.I., yeah, T.I. He do you remember when they were boycotting IHOP down there?
I remember. Now,
my question is that they were for the mistreatment of Black people, that they were boycotting IHOP, and they said that the one lady said that she don't want to she wanted them to be treated better because she likes the cake that they have there. My question is that
wow,
you bringing out food, you got know that they white, they racist, and they don't want Black people there, and you boycotting them because you want to be treated nicer by somebody who was bringing you food.
wow.
That was strange to me.
That is strange.
Wow.
It just shows you how sick our people are. Like we're so used to being mistreated by these people. I don't think we expect better. So we kind of try to mitigate when they do something that we expect, just so we won't feel. I don't know. I feel like it's like a defense mechanism, a mental defense mechanism in a way, to try and mitigate their actions, because it's like it's too hard for a lot of us to just admit and accept the fact that they don't like y'all asses.
They don't.
That's right.
They
No way I would
like
eat there. No way I would eat there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somebody bringing you a noted white supremacist bringing you out your food.
Right. And you going because you like the cake.
Because you like the cake.
And like Sister Lima said, that just shows you how mentally, how broken we are.
That's right.
I'll say that. We are very broken people. And the world knows it. They know it. They know it. They know it. I remember walking into this store one day, and I did it to make a point. My cousin, he's listening right now. We were riding in Baltimore City, and I said, man, all of the Asians, I said, they have the city on lock, man. I said, they have the liquor store. I said, I bet you $100, man, that liquor store is owned by Asian. And so he said, well, come on, let's go see. And we went in there, and we saw it. The Asians were behind a glass. So here it is, they're taking your money, right, behind a glass, okay? So the Asian people are behind like a bulletproof glass, and they're taking our money. And so when we were leaving out, a gentleman approached me, and he said, man, he said, we will stop shopping there for a while, but I'm going in here to get whatever I need to get. And I said, well, brother, why did you guys stop shopping in there? He said, well, one of the Asian cats called the little kid around here nigger. And he said, and so we stopped shopping, but we're back shopping with him now, And I said, well, brother, if this guy was calling our babies niggers, you all should have shut them down.
Exactly.
But you know what he said to me, Sister Lima? It's the only store in the hood. It's the only store around here, sis, so it's the only store around here. So we just continue to shop with them again. So like you said, Queen, we spend our money with these people a lot of times because of the convenience. It's right down the street,
It's just so ignorant. Just imagine, like I talked about all the time about tax time, how we get all this money. And it's like the only time where a lot of Black people get some money. Just imagine if they shut that business down. 10 people around tax time took their money and put that shit together, and they could have reopened that business within 6 months. But we don't think that way.
Right now.
We're always so dependent upon someone else to provide what the fuck we need. And a lot of that, in my opinion, is laziness.
Yes, there it is. There it is. I was just about to say that. They don't want to do the work.
Exactly, brother.
It's too much responsibility
Exactly.
for them.
It's just easy just to get your ass up and go to such and such a store, as opposed to having to be the one to get your ass up and open that store every day for the community. That's our problem. We got to get over this whole laziness, because being self-sufficient takes a lot of work. Just ask
it.
It's hard work, and we don't want to work hard. You should see the Black people talking online about waiting for their little $1,000 checks from the government. Like, it's ridiculous. We're always satisfied with mediocre things. We're satisfied with just the scraps, and then we're still comfortable.
That's true.
Yeah, damn. That's very true. Shims, you say, damn. But it is. It's so true. It's so true. So go ahead, Queen. Do economic action step 8, because I know you kept saying, I gotta go.
Attract semi-finished products into Black communities for value-added manufacturing, process, and assembly. In essence, I'm just going to read the summation on 146. He says, acting as a nation within a nation, Black America can use its limited resources to replicate products the very same way Japan did. We have to become more productive, and there are numerous good models in existence, but the Japanese economic development model is one of the best for Black America. I agree with replication of products, but one of the problems that we would have, especially like I was saying earlier, we are brand loyal. So
yes, we are.
It will be hard to convince Black people not to shop with a specific brand and to replicate that brand and still wear it, because we got this stigma in our community to where knockoffs are like, you know what I mean? Like if you wear a knockoff, somehow you're not as good or something like that. But I don't understand why, because a lot of the things that we do utilize and don't even notice are knockoffs of more expensive products anyway. But I don't think the average person really realizes that. But what do y'all think about this one here, number 8?
Yeah, I thought about it, Queen, that like you said, that we could replicate the products, but like you said, we're I don't want to call, I'm trying not to say the word, but labeled WH, label whores basically. We really are. And like you said, when we if someone wears, like you said, a knockoff Gucci bag, I mean, we'd be the first, like, that's a knockoff, and and we do that, we do that, or even Jordans, when they were trying to replicate Jordan, that's knockoff, that's not really Jordans, they're fake Jordans, And so yeah, I think you're right. Like I would be game for it, but but that's how, and I love how he brings that to our attention. That's how like the Japanese came up. Right. Remember they replicated a lot of products and made money off of those replicas. And
where people think that all these fake Gucci bags and Fendi bags and shit like that come from? They come from Asia.
Yep. And they made a lot of money off of that stuff. They made a lot of money.
Still make a lot of money, because now apparently there's this thing called bougie on the budget, where now it's okay to wear. Then again, I'm kind of retracting my earlier statements, because now it seems to be a little bit more accepted, especially for women, to wear knockoffs. Because I see the chicks on YouTube all the time showing knockoff bags. It's called bougie on a budget.
Wow. Wow. And so Dr. Claud Anderson is basically saying that, hey, there's nothing wrong with replicating, products in our community and selling them to each other. But I love at the end of this paragraph, Queen, where he says that the measure of progress in a people is not what they consume, but what they produce. What are you producing? What products and services do your family offer? Like, what are we collectively producing? So
I had a question for the panel. Is Dr. Claud Anderson a Black capitalist?
I would say so.
You'll say so? Because he's a little different from Dr. Amos Wilson approach. Dr. Amos Wilson comes to the same, a lot of his understanding. It's like I'm reviewing Dr. Amos Wilson when I'm reading Dr. Claud Anderson. But it's a distinction. Dr. Amos comes more from a Black nationalist perspective, I think, more so than Dr. Claud Anderson. I agree with a lot what Dr. Anderson saying. I'm not sure that we could. Black capitalism is going to work. I have to say that. You can't beat people who print money. You're going to have to some kind of way get into some type of re-educating the people, like the Koreans do. The Koreans come from like a socialist type of ideology. That's their culture. They don't have a problem of I think it's from years of being, a lot of times, like the Chinese, I think it's the years of being socialist, that they condition to operate as a group. I don't think that individual capitalism is going to work. I know I'm hitting the room with that, but I don't know if we do need an economic program. That's no question. That's what we're being exploited,
Right.
But I don't know if I think I'm more so I'm in alignment with Dr. Amos Wilson. Dr. Amos Wilson is basically a nationalist, and he's understanding capitalism through nationalism. I don't know if because what's to stop, an individual who gets lots of money to be like Michael Jordan? I don't see if it's not functioning in a group type. He's talking about group economics, but are you talking about a board? Like a CEOs of a board, that's controlling resources in the community. Because we can still get into the same situation if you function as a corporation. You can be like Walmart. You can be a black Walmart. You have a bunch of stores and you hire a bunch of people of a minimum wage jobs. But how are you functioning as are you revolutionary? Are you bringing are you coming to a situation where you're trying to create a nation within a nation like the Chinese? I think Dr. Amos Wilson is more stronger there.
I think are you alluding to that under his suggestions that it's possible that we could end up in the same situation as far as capitalistically, but that instead of white people, it would just be black people?
That's what I'm thinking.
What you're saying, like
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
To make sure that we don't end up in that situation to where there is like a few people at the top just kind of rationing out the rest for the bottom.
Because I think that's where community control I believe in. I don't believe in necessarily a group of people controlling the land and the resources. I believe in you can have representatives. Say, for example, you in Atlanta, I'm in Detroit, Dr. Maat is in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. I believe in representation, but overall, I believe in community power. That's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily agree with the board, giving out rations. That's what concerns me.
I agree with that.
Yeah, same here, definitely. All right, so I think we had 2 or 3 more economic step actions. I think it's up to, I think we go to number 12. Yep, number 12. But it says economic actions, step number 9, promote the competitive advantages of Black communities. So he says urban Black neighborhoods have an excellent competitive business advantages because of our strategic location, our workforce. He says market demands, disposable incomes, little business, competition, lands and buildings, and a great potential for high returns on investment. And he says, until recently, there was little interest in promoting Black urban communities for anything, but times are changing for the better. As stated earlier, this nation has always had flourishing alternative economies in ethnic communities. So he goes on to say that Blacks should similarly build and promote their urban business communities and the numerous business advantages. So at the bottom, he says we can rebuild our neighborhoods into communities by using the competitive advantages of geographical location, consumer markets, population concentration, human resources, and disposable income of Black communities. The 10th action step says economic action step 10, establish safe business zones based on a code of conduct in Black business communities. So he says, and I mean, I think that just saying that speaks for itself, right? So he basically says, so let's begin by protecting our new business communities and start enforcing a new code of conduct that spells out acceptable standards of behavior and is promoted and enforced by all segments of the community. The code of conduct should include creative means to challenge and punish those who violate these business communities. I remember here in Baltimore, in West Baltimore City, I had a aunt who married a Jamaican brother who had a convenience store right in West Baltimore.
Wow.
And
That's
the brothers, but the brothers kept robbing the store.
Wow.
He came into the community. He hired a few people from the neighborhood, and he had his eyes wide open, like, hey, I'm gonna, help my people. And he ended up hiring some folks, and they kept robbing the store. And they robbed the store to the point where he had to close down because he feared that one day they were going to rob and maybe kill him or my aunt. And so they ended up closing the store down. So this really, hit home for me when it said to establish safe business zones. So it would have been great if somebody would have stepped up in that neighborhood, or, the head honcho, I don't know who runs the block or whatever, and said, this business is off limits. It's a Black owned and operated business. Not only should it be respected because it's a Black owned and operated business, but it's a business that, one, hire people in our community, right? And two, put money back into the community. So look, we're not going to sell drugs here. We're not going to shoot here. We're not going to rob here. It should have been a safe business zone. Mm-hmm. So I agree wholeheartedly with Brother Claud Anderson that we definitely had to establish safe business zones upon a code of conduct in our communities.
Me too.
Does anyone want to add to that? Because I think that pretty much sums up the
economic. That sums it up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you believe that if the community was being fed by that business, like we're talking about is a communal type of environment where resources is like grocery stores and various businesses. If that was a source of survival for the community, would people react a little differently if he was getting robbed and resources was taken from people who rely on that business for a source of survival?
I think it would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it would, brother. But because there's so many options available, hey, rob them, right? We sell the store up the street, whatever.
Yep, we'll rob them. We'll go to the Chinese man around the corner.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. And the brother ended up having to close down.
Damn.
Having to close down.
That's sad.
It is sad. It is sad.
So moving on to economic action step 11, he says amass vision, capital, and wealth through community-based financial efforts. So he says that without investment capital, there will be no Black businesses or industries. Mm-hmm. According to Melvin L. Oliver and Thomas M. I guess that's Shapiro, it says in their book, Black Wealth, White Wealth, 61% of Black households are marginal, with the majority of their assets in automobile and home ownership. Mm-hmm. Our challenge then is to identify creative ways to amass capital to finance our own empowerment. So he says, well, where do Blacks get the money to start businesses and industry? He said they first get it from themselves. They begin with their annual disposable incomes. We must begin to save more of the little that we do have, right? And then he goes on to say consuming is a negative in capitalistic society, right? It means to use up, it means to exhaust. So he says that he goes on to say that there are three primary sources of large amounts of capital: public markets, traditional financial institutions, and private markets. Mm-hmm. So he says, just like wealth begets wealth, poverty begets poverty. Blacks must organize and operate their own banks, credit unions, CDCs, savings and loans, venture capital firms, and investment clubs. Mm-hmm. They already exist. Support them and demand that if they are in your neighborhood, they support your Powernomics community building efforts. So at the end of this, he mentions reparations, and he says that reparations is outside the traditional sources of capital, but it is a bill that is owed to Black people and one that must present to the nation for payment. And he says that reparations payment for centuries of slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery can take many forms. Government or private corporations can make restitution through such efforts as cash payments, land grants, educational scholarships, tax-exempt status, and free health care. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Checks. I get so tired of hearing about checks in reference to reparations. I want some goddamn resources, bitch. Keep that money, bitch. We want some oil reserves. We want some reserves, bitch. We want some land around this motherfucker, and we'll figure out the rest. Y'all can keep them checks.
You can keep the cash.
We spend $500 billion a year. We don't need their fucking money. That's not the issue. We don't need it.
You're talking about residual income,
right? We need to control over some natural resources.
Yes,
that's key.
Yes,
that's key. But what's crazy? I was reading up on the Civil War. And they said that once the Civil War was over, I forgot the European guy's name. I could go and bring it up.
John Brown?
I'll bring it up because I know that's going to bother you and I, Shamsu. I'll look for it while Sister Alima summarizes this last action step. But basically, in the Civil War, there was a general who had a lot of Black soldiers. And he said, at the end of the war, he said, well, what did you want? And so he organized, I think they said it was maybe 10 Black ministers. they all came together. And he said, what do you want? And they said, we want land. I don't know if you remember that, Brother Shamsu, but I'm going to look it up
Is
right
that
now.
where the 40 acres and a mule came out of, or?
Well, they claim that it came from the 40 acres and a mule came from the senator.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but it was something else. But hold on, I'm gonna look it up because I know
Yeah, I'd
that's
like
gonna
to see
bother
that.
me.
I would like to see that.
Okay, economic action step 12 by Dr. Maat is looking that up. Establish international economic alliances and marketing agreements between Black America, Black Africa, and the Caribbean nations. I think that pretty much sums it up well. So he's just basically saying that Black America should play the lead role in constructing international economic alliances and marketing arrangements between the sub-Saharan African countries, the Caribbean, and the nation of Brazil. I agree with this 100% that it is important to establish international ties because that can help strongly in nation building, because I sincerely believe that in order to strongly and politically create a nation within a nation, you need an established nation's backing. So not only would we need the backing of the United States, we would need the backing of other countries, in essence, would be our allies, which would also help to protect us from being attacked by the United States like we were before. Some scholars predict that up to half of Blacks in Africa may perish by the year 2013. Thank goodness that wasn't true, but this was in reference to the AIDS epidemic. They weren't sure at the time, but in essence, he's just talking about different industries, third world nations, and how we could utilize those nations that are called third world nations to our advantage by building alliances with them. On page 152, he's got a table, the world distribution of wealth and human capital. They got the per capita gross. They've got engineers and scientists per million of population, and then the world distribution of wealth per county per capita. And if you look at Africa, started the United States is close to the bottom as far as wealth distribution. They're in the middle, but at the bottom is Africa, and they're in the negatives.
Negative thousands.
Yes.
1,000.
Yes. That's negative as far as the wealth per county per capita. And so, I mean, that basically sums up our existence. Black Africans nations are so far beneath white and Asian nations that their statistics are in the negative, of course. Yet the wealth gap is so great that is a miracle that Black Africa can survive. And I agree with that. So in conclusion, on page 154, the cycle of wealth begins with control of natural resources. The cycle is now in the information stage. The 12 action steps presented in the chapter reflect the new orientation of practicing group economics and should give Blacks new ideas about how to benefit from the cycle of wealth and take control of their economic future. Other groups use our neighborhoods and population as resources to enrich themselves. If others can become rich off of us, we must think outside the box, redirect our resources to benefit ourselves. This chapter provided guidance to the communities, organizations, and individuals who wish to work together toward fulfilling the vision of self-sufficient and competitive Black America.
Oh, wait, sister. I heard her slam the book like,
What is the difference? They're saying Ethiopia, and then they're saying Black Africa.
Because Ethiopia, a large percentage of the population are Ethiopians. They're not Africans. Now they're Africans by the fact that they're from there, but a lot of them stem towards like Middle Eastern folks.
Oh, okay.
Racially. So that's why it's separated.
Okay. All right. And this is what I was talking about, and I'll be very brief. It was a guy named William T. Sherman. And so he was an American soldier, businessman, educator, and author, and he served as a general in the Union Army during the Civil War. And so he developed something called a document called Special Field Orders Number 15. Are you familiar with this, Brother Simsu, or nah?
No, I'm not familiar with this one. I'm pulling them up right now.
Okay, cool. So he developed or created a document called Special Field Orders Number 15. And it says military orders issued during the American Civil War. It says on January the 16th, 1865 by General William Sherman. They provided for the confiscation of 400,000 acres of land along the Atlantic coast of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and the dividing of it into parcels of not more than 40 acres. It says on which were to be settled approximately 18,000 formerly enslaved families and other Blacks living in that area. It says the orders had little concrete effect, and President Andrew Johnson issued a proclamation that returned the land to the Southern owners that took a loyalty oath. And it said that he had met with 20 Negro leaders to see what they desire for their people. All of them were ministers, mostly Baptists and Methodists. And they said, we want the land. you know? So back then, like you said, Sister Lima, we were like, we want the land. Give us the resources.
But we understood very well back then what it took. And then somewhere along the lines, we stopped focusing on economics and started focusing on being treated fairly.
Because we moved to the city. We left the South. If you look at most of your relatives who was in the South, they were farmers.
Yep, they were.
And so they understood how to harvest land. When we moved to the city, a lot of those skills was forgotten. It wasn't passed on, or wasn't passed on to the next generation.
That's right.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. So I think this was a great build tonight. I know next week we'll be reading chapter 6, industrialization using your new paradigms. Building industries is the first step towards building monopolies. So family, join us back here next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to discuss chapter 6 of Powernomics. Does anyone have any closing words?
Peace and love, family.
Peace and love.
She want to leave quick.
Peace.